This is where her shadow took form, the witch who walks between worlds, guardian of thresholds, mother of tempests, midwife of the dying earth. She was not born in comfort, nor in kindness, nor beneath any human night. She was born when the forest first remembered its hunger, when the soil stirred, the wind shuddered, and the earth spoke its own name in fear. Her story begins before language, before saints or sinners, long before fire learned to fear the dark. She has lived in every whisper of the woods, in every sigh between thunder and silence. This is the story of how winter took form, learned mercy, and the world gave her a name, Baba Yaga. Before villages had names, the forest already dreamed. Its silence stretched like eternity wrapped in bark. Roots whispered to rivers, rivers answered with sleep. Every tree was an old thought wearing snow. When mankind entered, the forest listened, patient. It did not fear. It remembered. And from that remembrance, something conscious began to move beneath the frost. From frozen silence she rose, not born but assembled. Her body remembered the shape of storms, hair like smoke twined with roots, eyes as still as frozen lakes. No blood, only wind. The forest's thought had chosen a face. When she opened her mouth, the wind paused. When she blinked, snow forgot its fall. She saw not the world, but its memory. Each flake, each drop, each shadow spoke. Knowledge poured into her like thaw. She learned sorrow before speech, justice before judgment. Balance was her inheritance. From that instant, the world divided. Creation on one side, forgetting on the other. She was appointed to walk the line between. Beneath the ice, the forest's oldest voice rose. "Guard the middle," it said, "where life turns to death." She answered by breathing. Her breath froze mid-air, becoming the north wind. Her second breath became instinct. Her third remained untouched, reserved for mercy. The world trembled, understanding its bargain had found form. She walked through storm without flinch. Lightning bent to her like disciples. Where she passed, fire cooled and wind listened. Roots lifted to guide her path. The forest claimed her openly. In that claim, she ceased to be woman. She was now law, patient, vast, and older than guilt. Beasts brought tokens, antlers, fur, feathers. She burned them not for hunger, but return. Smoke climbed, carrying memory home. When humans copied the rite, their fear pleased her. Fear is a form of respect. Thus the first pact began. Give reverence, take safety. The forest learned worship. Mortals learned distance. She learned mercy from rivers, which forgive without remembering. Flow teaches surrender. So she forgave as water does, without drama, without record. Where anger slept, she poured calm. Where grief waited, she offered silence. The forest's language softened around her name, folding it into song. To seal her vow, she cut the oldest tree. Its sap ran silver, speaking in small streams. "Guard the center," she whispered. The bark accepted. Her duty became the forest's equilibrium. To end when ending was due. To spare when sparing served. Balance, not mercy, was holiness here. She gazed into still water and met her other selves, maiden, mother, storm, decay. Time circled her like wolves. She smiled faintly. Eternity felt familiar. Immortality, she realized, is not living forever, but refusing to leave the task unfinished. She turned from the mirror before pity could find her. When centuries grew heavy, she built shelter from storms. Bones rose where trees once fell. Each bone hummed with memory. She spoke a word, and fire shaped walls around her. It was not a house, but a boundary made visible. Even homes, she thought, must learn how to walk away. Thus the hut learned motion. It paced like thought, restless and wise. When mocked, it ran. When lonely, it spun. It carried her heart and her solitude. Each step rewrote geography. To chase her was to follow a story refusing capture. The forest laughed. It loved her unruliness. She marked her circle with bone and flame. The skulls lit pathways for souls who had forgotten direction. From afar, mortals saw horror. Within, travelers saw refuge. Judgment, she learned, depends on the angle of fear. Her realm was not cruel, only exact. No unbalanced act entered her gate unmeasured. She stood beneath a generous moon, unowned and unbound. Wind carried syllables through branches. Baba Yaga, half warning, half prayer. She did not correct it. Names were useful to others. To her, they were only weather, passing sounds. She answered to silence, for silence holds every name that time forgets. When dawn at last found her woods, the light hesitated before entering. She greeted it with a nod, granting permission. The forest stretched, waking in harmony. She did not command the day. She hosted it. Thus balance continued, night learning generosity, day learning restraint. The cycle turned with her at its hinge. And so she endures, keeper of thresholds, mother of storms. Mortals call her monster. Trees call her kin. Her hut still walks, its bones creaking lullabies. In snow's hush, you might hear her name. Not threat, not comfort, just truth. The echo of balance itself, walking forever between mercy and necessity. Across the Slavic lands, Baba Yaga is never one thing. She changes with every telling, sometimes helper, sometimes horror. To children, she is fear. To wanderers, judgment. To the wise, a teacher of thresholds. Her stories outlive the mouths that speak them. Among these endless stories, one begins softly. The tale of Vasilisa, the girl who carried kindness like a lamp through endless dark. Her story begins not in fear, but in love, the kind that binds the living to memory. Before her last breath, Vasilisa's mother gave her a doll. "Feed it when you eat," she whispered, "and speak to it when you despair." It was more than a toy. It was a mother's final prayer, shaped into patience, bound in cloth, and filled with love's quiet persistence. After her mother's death, Vasilisa's house grew cold. Her father remarried, bringing a woman whose heart was carved from envy and frost. Her stepsisters scorned her gentleness, mocked her insolence, and envied her grace. But every night she shared a crumb with her doll and whispered, "Help me, little one." Days became years of quiet torment. Her stepmother gave her impossible tasks, sifting ashes, spinning thread too fine to see, carrying water from the frozen well. But the doll always helped, working in silence, unseen by the cruel eyes that wished her spirit to fail. When patience would not break her, malice invented new labor. One autumn night, the stepmother doused every candle and hearth. "We have no fire," she said. "One of us must fetch light." And though no one dared name the neighbor, all eyes turned to the forest's black heart. Vasilisa wrapped herself in a thin cloak and stepped into the cold. No light guided her, only the whisper of wind and the weight of her promise. The doll rested in her pocket, warm against her palm, and she followed its silent wisdom into the place where all stories begin. At dawn, Vasilisa saw a rider dressed in white. His horse gleamed like ice under first light, and as he passed, the black trees blushed silver. The forest inhaled, alive again. Dawn itself had taken human form, calm, relentless, and silent. When the sun climbed to its height, another rider thundered past. This one wore red like flame, and where his horse struck the ground, warmth spilled into the roots. Vasilisa paused, feeling life stir under snow. The forest burned without fire, glowing with secret joy. At dusk, the last rider came. His armor swallowed the light, and his horse moved soundlessly through the trees. Where he passed, the day folded into itself. Night closed its eyes, and the forest listened. The doll whispered, "These are not men, but ours, servants of her dominion." The forest was alive. Each sound had intention, each silence weight. Snow moved like breath. The wind spoke her name in half-syllables. She walked carefully, heart steady, her courage born not of ignorance, but of faith. And somewhere ahead, the air began to smell faintly of smoke. The clearing opened like a wound in the woods. There stood the house, a thing both alive and impossible. It turned slowly, creaking on its vast legs, as if seeking her face. Its windows glowed with inner fire. The doll whispered, "We have found her." Vasilisa stood, trembling, as the ground itself seemed to move. The house spun in circles, creaking like laughter. The doll stirred in her pocket and whispered, "You must speak the words." Her voice broke the silence. "Hut, oh hut, turn your back to the forest and your front to me." The forest hushed. The hut shuddered once, then turned. Its legs folded, its walls sighed, and its door faced her. For a heartbeat, the world itself seemed to bow. From within came a voice like cracking ice. "Enter, child of silence," it said. And Vasilisa stepped across the threshold. The witch was waiting. Tall as the rafters, her hair a tangle of smoke, she turned her head with the sound of branches cracking in frost. "Why have you come?" she asked. "To ask for fire," said Vasilisa. The witch smiled, a thin, knowing curve. "Fire you shall have," said the witch, "if you can serve me." She gestured to the bins. "Separate the seeds of life from the dust of death before dawn. Fail and become food for the soil." Then she turned away, her laughter fading into snow. When sleep took her, the doll began its work. Grain from shadow, light from dark. Its song was too small for ears. By dawn, every kernel lay clean and bright. The witch turned away, unreadable. Love had done what fear could not. "Not bad, little mortal," she said. "Now spin me a thread from dew, strong enough to bind wind, thin enough to vanish when seen." She left her wheel beside the window, and Vasilisa's breath turned white with resolve. The doll worked while Vasilisa prayed. It drew the dew across the wheel, spinning light into silence, silence into strength. By morning, a spool lay waiting, invisible except when touched by breath. The witch's hand trembled when she lifted it. "Few can weave what cannot be seen," she said. "Tonight," said Baba Yaga, "you will sweep my yard clean. Gather every shadow that has forgotten its master and place it back beneath the trees. If dawn finds even one wandering, you will stay here forever." Then she rose into the night upon her mortar. The forest breathed as the doll worked. Shadows lifted from stones, from roots, from the air itself. Each returned to its rightful place beneath sleeping branches. By dawn, the yard gleamed cold and bare. Vasilisa's breath turned steady as prayer. "At last, one more thing, child," she said. "Carry these ashes to the river. They are what remains when night is burned away. Do not spill them, or the world will forget how to sleep." Her eyes narrowed. "You've done more than any mortal could. Tell me, how?" "You were not alone," the witch said. "I have seen your little helper move when you rest." Vasilisa's breath trembled. She drew out the doll and placed it in her open palm. "My mother's love works through this," she said. "I hid nothing. I only obeyed kindness." The witch tilted her head. "So love keeps its bargains better than fear," she murmured. Then at last she nodded once. "Truth is rarer than magic." She turned away and stirred the cauldron. "Take your ashes to the river, girl. Let the forest see what honesty returns." The ashes touched the water, and stars appeared within it. The river sighed, as though recognizing its reflection. When she returned, Baba Yaga waited in silence. The witch's gaze softened, not mercy, but acknowledgement. "Take your fire," she said. "Go before the forest learns to love you too much." The witch lifted the skull from the hearth. Its eyes burned steady, but the warmth was kind. She placed it into Vasilisa's hands and whispered, "Carry it home. It will burn only falsehood." The hut sighed behind them. For a heartbeat, mentor and child shared one light. She walked 3 nights through woods that remembered her footfall. No branch caught her cloak. No hidden root rose to test her step. Shadows leaned toward the light, not in fear, but recognition. The doll slept, trusting the way already learned by love. Home approached like a memory returning from far away. Vasilisa paused at the boundary path and listened. The skull's flame hummed softly, patient as breath. Somewhere a shutter closed. Somewhere a crow lifted. Truth was about to arrive where lies had grown heavy. She entered without ceremony. The hearth held only ash. The skull's eyes brightened, not in anger, but in purpose. Vasilisa set it upon the mantel and stepped back, hands folded, heart calm. The room waited, as if listening for its own confession. The flame saw everything that had been said and done in darkness. It did not rage. It revealed. Where cruelty had lived, heat gathered until the lie could not stand. When it finished, silence remained. Heavy, clean, exact. Vasilisa bowed her head, grieving and grateful together. "Little one," she whispered, "what do we do now?" The doll warmed her palms like breath. It needed no words, Some journeys end by returning what was borrowed. Some end by leaving what is finished. Vasilisa understood. She gathered food, water, and thread, and stepped outside into air newly washed of shadows. She wove the dew thread into cloth so light it could have been morning itself. Villagers brought coins for warmth they couldn't see, only feel. Word traveled quietly, like winter gossip. A merchant carried the cloth to the city, where hands far from forests trembled at its touch. A message returned. The Tsar wished a shirt from that impossible weave. Vasilisa stitched in silence, every seam a prayer of gratitude. When the garment reached the palace, the hall brightened as if dawn had been invited indoors. The Tsar asked to meet the maker of mourning. He did not ask for miracles. He asked for her name, her patience, and the story of her mother's gift. When she finished, the courtyard seemed larger. "Marry me," he said at last, "or if not, accept my protection." Vasilisa smiled, choosing what felt like peace rather than rescue. They wed without spectacle. No trumpets, only bread and salt. The doll sat quietly on the table, and the skull's flame burned in a lantern by the door, watching like an old friend. Vasilisa's heart felt like a warmed stone pulled from a river, still, weighty, content. Baba Yaga watched the air above the trees and smiled into her cup. "Another lesson returned," she murmured. She neither blessed nor cursed. She remembered. The hut lifted one foot and set it down again, as if agreeing. What the witch gives is not safety. It is understanding. Fire is truth when tended, ruin when ignored. Vasilisa kept the flame carefully, and it kept her. In another world, a different girl might have chosen pride. Here, patience learned to speak in light. "Sleep," she whispered. "You have carried me farther than fear." The box clicked shut like a satisfied breath. From then on, the doll woke only for gratitude, not rescue. Love had graduated into wisdom. Years later, the tale was told as if it had always existed. The girl, the doll, the hut that walks. Children listened wide-eyed. Elders nodded as if they remembered. Stories wear the shape of the listeners who need them most. Time continued its patrol. Dawn opened the gates. Noon warmed the bones. Night laid its cool hand across wondering eyes. Somewhere in that turning, a witch kept watch, and a woman kept house, and a lamp kept truth. Whispers traveled, a deathless king whose heart hid where hands could not reach. The forest tilted its head, listening. Baba Yaga tapped ash from her pipe and narrowed her eyes. Some lessons take the long road. Some refuse to learn until winter speaks sharply. Old powers shifted, the air remembering older names. The forest sighed a warning the villagers could not hear. Vasilisa slept peacefully, unaware she was now a stitch in a greater weaving. Balance tightened its threads. Silence returned to the place where miracles had been ordinary. The wind erased the edges. Memory settled like frost, sharp and generous. What had happened would continue happening in the mouths of those who needed courage. This part of the story ends where another begins. A girl learned truth and carried it carefully. A witch guarded the line between mercy and necessity. And beyond the snow, a deathless name waited for someone brave enough to knock. The fire has not gone out. It burns in another hearth, remembering hands it once warmed. Where a girl learned truth through kindness, a man now approaches with winter in his breath. The path is the same, yet the air sharper, the silence is longer. Stories repeat to test the living. Every tale that begins in the woods must end there too, though endings wear different masks. They whisper his name across the steppe until the wind learns its shape. Koshchei, the deathless. He was once a prince, bright as hammered gold, until fear crept into his pillow like frost. That single thought hollowed him, and where the heart thins, hunger grows. He left warm halls behind for the one hearth that answers pride with consequence. Baba Yaga sat by her coals, listening as embers folded in on themselves. She remembered a child who arrived empty-handed and left with a flame that told the truth. A different foot now thudded against the snow, carrying a vow against endings. Even death grows restless when mortals forget their place, she murmured, the words tasting of iron and smoke. Snow fell without sound. Beneath the crusted drifts, the roots turned uneasily, like Sisyphus refusing a bad dream. Owls held their breath mid-flight. The forest felt something approaching that refused the courtesy of doubt. Wind lifted, tested, then stilled again, as if deciding whether to warn or watch. The woods, which forgive slowly, prepared to remember more sharply. He crossed the boundary where travelers usually pause to bow. Koshchei did not. He entered the tree line like a blade, taking space from the air. Each step closed a door behind him. Each breath salted the snow. The trees leaned away, and the raven's eye dimmed. He walked as if the world were a garment he had already outworn. The hut sensed him first, its chicken legs flexed, kneecaps creaking like old ice. Around it, skull lanterns pivoted, their sockets bright with watchful fire. "Be still," said the witch. The house subsided, a beast returning to haunches. The fence rattled like teeth. Then came 3 deliberate taps upon the door, polite as winter, certain as hunger. The door swung open, and storm air wrestled with the hearth's breath. Koshchei bowed, a ceremony without respect. "You seek me," she said, "yet you do not fear me." "I seek no mercy, only mastery," he said. "I wish to live forever." "To live without death is to drink without thirst," she said. "Then I will thirst forever," he said. She studied him until even the flame dimmed to listen. "Then you must pay," she said. "Everything has a cost." "Whatever remains of my soul," he said. "Souls are poor currency," she said. "They spend easily and buy only silence." He smiled, thin as ice at dawn, certain silence was a small price for never ending. Baba Yaga rose, and the hut rose with her, timber joints answering bone. She lifted her staff, smoke unspooled into patterns older than speech. Life and death, divided by deceit, breath and bone, sealed in retreat, she said. The fire recoiled, astonished by its own shadow. Runes wandered the air like embers deciding where to land. The room thickened until movement felt like memory. "Where will you hide your ending?" she said. "Where no mortal can reach it," he said, "in mirrors of mirrors, in pages of bone." She nodded once, the judgment inside the gesture. "So be it," she said. She laid a needle on the table, and beside it, an egg that breathed like a moth. "Hide them well. They will be your fortress and your tomb," she said. He gathered the instruments with hands that had forgotten tenderness. Outside, The skulls turned their silent faces toward the path. The house shifted, eager to forget his shape. The witch watched him go, the air closing behind him like stitches drawn through cloth. At the world's numb edge, he raised a palace from frozen sound. Walls of blue crystal held lightning like preserved veins. Gates of iron yawned without guards. Within, he nested his death. Egg inside duck, duck inside hare, hare inside iron chest. Chest beneath an oak, so old it remembered thunder before rain. He bound it all in spells that salved echoes. Years blurred into centuries. Snow learned his measurements, drift by drift. He wore a crown that would not come off, a smile that never reached warmth. Empires flowered and fell like frost roses beneath his gaze. He sat, a sermon against change. Time circled him like a wary dog. He mistook that circling for obedience instead of warning. There are hungers that devour even victories. He consumed gold and the gossip of kings, tested the patience of queens, drank applause until it tasted like dust. Lovers pressed their pulses to his mouth and felt nothing in return. Rivers declined his reflection. The sun forgot his name at noon. He endured, thinner than pride, louder than silence. In her hut, the witch felt the floorboards breathe wrong. Roots beneath the house writhed as if chafing at restraints. She touched the planks, listening with her palm. "Balance has bruised," she said. The skulls brightened in cautious agreement. She fed the fire 3 drops of oil. The flame lifted its head like a hound catching a scent at the edge of weather. The oak that kept his ending began to weep amber, sap running like patient fire. The hare twitched in its burrow, a drum remembering the first song. A duck rose from the hollow and carried a tremor beneath its wing. Across distant roofs, dreamers saw a pale egg pulsing inside snow. The forest whispered names mortals had not earned. A hunter awoke before dawn, with purpose sewn into his breath. He did not know the words of the summons. His feet knew them. He followed the hare through glassy drifts and thorn-dark branches. When sky and earth met like 2 exhausted beasts, an oak appeared, wide as a memory. The world refuses to misplace. Beneath its ribs waited iron. He knelt, brushed frost from the chest, and felt his life tilt. The lock resisted, then remembered mercy. Hinges sabassied like old birds. Inside lay nothing a village would trade for bread, yet the air insisted on reverence. He reached. Far away, frost jumped across a wall, and a crown sang a hairline crack. The world inhaled like a bell. Baba Yaga stood in Koshay's hall without moving dust. Her cloak forgot to settle, as if the room lacked gravity for truths. He raised his head, every line on his face a refusal. "You caged what must move," she said. "Now the cage will open." "You would end me, old one," he said. "I do not end. I return," she said. Her staff met the floor with the sound of bone remembering thunder. Light spread along the cracks like rivers freed from treaties. The palace discovered it was water, pretending to be stone. Far away, the hunter lifted an egg that warmed his gloves through. "What you hold is pride dressed as life," whispered something that was not the wind. The shell trembled with the caution of a first confession. Hairline light stitched itself across the curve. The hunter watched without understanding, which is the proper posture for witnessing. Koshai pressed a hand to his chest where no heart lived. "You cannot undo eternity," he said. "It undoes itself," she said. The crack widened like a mouth that finally chooses truth. When it opened, the room filled with a color no herald had ever worn. Towers softened to mist. Iron forgot its orders. The crown released his skull with a wet sigh. He tried to stand and met the weight of endings he had deferred. There is no word for that. Gravity. The witch stepped aside so the world could pass through him cleanly. The fortress sank into thaw, each stone a confession melting into soil. Rivers dragged their fingers through the wreckage and found themselves again. The sky blushed like a messenger, relieved to deliver hard news. "Every bargain must come home," she said. Her voice made daylight taller. The echo traveled through corridors that remembered they were only weather and time. The hunter blinked as the egg dissolved into warmth. In his hands, absence weighed more than iron. The oak sealed its own wound. The hair slowed to a heartbeat, suitable for mornings. The duck vanished into ordinary sky. He would return home empty and fed, unable to explain the fullness in his pockets. Some stories pay their keep by leaving quietly. Koshai fell as ideas fall, without body, without noise, without the dignity of dust. He did not crash. He ceased. The place he had occupied closed like water after ore. No grave could hold him. Gravity prefers the honest. The last thing to leave the room was his certainty, and even that dissolved like salt deciding to be ocean again. Baba Yaga did not smile. Mercy is not delight. Balance is not applause. She watched the air learn to move without him. The old oaths took a breath. Her staff cooled in her hand. "Pride is the longest winter," she said. The hall agreed by collapsing softly, as if not to wake a sleeping child. Snow entered, then changed its mind. News traveled like roots, quiet, swift, thorough. Wolves lifted their muzzles and lowered them with the relief of smaller hungers. Farmers found water where soil had refused a voice. In cities, time resumed its bad habits and good rituals. Nothing in heaven changed. Everything on earth remembered its spine. The world prefers endings that arrive at walking pace. In her hut, the witch set a pot to muttering. Steam braided itself with the rafters. She opened the window a finger's width and let the weather in, just enough to remind Flame it was not a tyrant. The skull lanterns shifted from blue to gold. "There," she said. The hut settled, a house recognizing its body after a long fever. She thought of the girl who fed her dole crumbs of courage and spoke the truth when asked. She thought of the man who mistook hunger for eternity. Between them lay the road every heart walks, to keep, to give, to hoard, to release. The fire leaned toward her breath as though hearing its own origin named again. Night folded itself around the clearing, gentle as a shawl. The hut turned its face toward stars like windows in a sleeping city. Owls resumed their arithmetic. Somewhere, a fox praised small mercies in footnotes across snow. The witch stirred the coals until they purred like cats that remember tigers. Peace is not silence. It is music with the volume set to breath. Yet stories do not finish. They hand torches to the next pair of walking feet. Somewhere, a child listened to an elder bending the world into sentences. Somewhere, a ruler dreamed of vows too heavy for daylight. Somewhere, a widow remembered how to speak her own name. The forest kept watch the way a hearth keeps watch. Patient, exact, unwilling to flatter. Koshchei's name did not vanish. It became a caution sewn into lullabies. Mothers warned kettles with it. Blacksmiths drove it into iron and forgot which blow held the lesson. Priests tried to file it into doctrine. It resisted like splinters. The word outlived the man, because warnings are made of longer timber than boasts. Children laughed and understood more than they admitted. Winter loosened, not with trumpets, but with small negotiations. Icicles retired from eaves. Doors remembered how to open without argument. The river invited stones to move a little, then a little more. Law returned to the world in the form of thaw. What was stubborn flowed. What was brittle listened. That is the manner in which forgiveness visits weather. The hunter reached his village at dusk. He smelled like travel and questions. When his wife asked what the north had given, he shrugged, surprised to find his shoulders light. He sat. He ate. He slept without dreaming, which is a kind of wealth unpaid men recognize. In the morning, he mended a fence and did not know he had rescued mornings. Baba Yaga cleaned her mortar with handfuls of snow and ash. She set the broom where it could see the door. Tools are happiest when they expect to be needed. "Not today," she said. "Today the world can walk unescorted." The house creaked, as if laughing under its breath. The fence counted its skulls and found the number correct, for once. She brewed tea that tasted like bark trying to be thunder. Steam wrote letters to absent mountains on the window. The cup warmed her fingers as memory warmed the room, neither hot nor sentimental. "He wanted never to end," she said. "He got what endings are made for instead." The tea agreed by refusing sweetness and offering clarity. At the oak, sap thickened into amber that would once hold insects. Today it held a lesson. The hair left careful tracks, as if underlining the path for future feet. The duck practiced ordinary flights. No relic remained for museums hungry for proof. The proof was in behavior, the way wind remembered restraint, the way light chose not to be a knife. A traveler passed the melted field and said the ground looked as if a city had dreamed there. Another swore the horizon had been taller yesterday. A third found a ring of iron in the thaw and wore it until her finger learned a new patience. None of them were wrong. The world tells stories in plural, and the plural is true. Sometimes at night, the hut lifted one foot and set it down again, the way a sleeper shifts to keep a dream from sticking. Baba Yaga listened to that motion as a captain listens to timbers during stormless seas. "You remember," she said. "Houses remember tenants the way forests remember storms, without bitterness, with geometry." The witch stepped outside and let snow catch in her hair like small admissions. Above, constellations arranged themselves into old lawsuits and ancient reconciliations. She did not smile. She permitted the world to proceed. Authority at its bravest is permission rightly given. In a city far beyond the last spruce, a bell rang without hand. Those who heard it paused, then bowed to no one, then continued kinder. A librarian misshelved a book in a way that healed a reader. A cobbler tightened a stitch he would once have ignored. When balance moves, it recruits strangers into its choreography without filing schedules. Some said Koshchei died. Others said he never lived, only refused to stop pretending. The witch allowed both rumors their candles. "Names are tools," she said. "Tools are honest when used." She banked the fire until it glowed like kummutanais discipline. Tomorrow asked for nothing yet. She agreed to that budget and slept the kind of sleep that forgives without forgetting. Morning walked in wearing pale shoes. Frost freckles on the threshold stepped aside. The hut opened one eye, then the other. Baba Yaga rose, older than answers, younger than duties. She swept the floor so questions would have room. Outside, a fox rehearsed invisibility and failed, which pleased it. The day began with inventory: wood, water, breath, patience. If you ask where immortality went, the forest will point to rivers behaving themselves. If you ask what remained of pride, the sky will show you a color reserved for after. If you ask who saved the world, a village will introduce a man who mends fences on time. Heroes are often paid in chores. Chores are frequently holy. She sat beside her hearth, the same flame that tested a girl and revealed a prince to himself. Her eyes reflected both sentences. Stirring the ashes with her hand, she spoke to no one and to everything. Outside, snow fell in unhurried spirals. The forest slept, not in fear, but in peace that knows its boundaries. Truth is rarer than magic. There are stories winter keeps folded in the seams of its coat, only releasing when breath smokes and footfalls hush. In those stories, the witch is not a single figure, but 3 currents braided into one river. People name her Baba Yaga for convenience. The forest has time to remember differently. It knows the sisters as forces, night, earth, and dawn, moving together like weather rehearsed. Night's sister arrives when lamps surrender. Frost arranges itself under her steps like script. Owls conduct their arithmetic from branches sharpened by stars. She tends borders and the hidden hinge of conscience, carrying a key smelted from cooled constellation. Where she passes, promises rediscover their edges, and mirrors lose their appetite for flattery. The dark does not thicken. It clarifies, separating shadow from pretense. Earth's sister works with patient pressure. Her hands know the grain of wood and the breath of soil. Seeds lean toward her as if remembering a teacher. Fallow fields stand when she enters, recognizing audit and mercy braided. Bread is not a metaphor in her keeping. It is an oath. Wells deepen. Stones negotiate with roots. What is planted learns the manners of enough. Dawn's sister travels barefoot on the horizon. Birds stitch mourning to her hair with bright thread. She keeps the ceremony of beginnings without trumpets. Quiet doors opening, shutters remembering they are windows, lungs relearning courage. Fear dissolves not through argument, but through light, patient enough to wait at the threshold until it is invited. The first color of day is her handwriting across roofs. People argue whether 3 houses stand at the edge of the woods or a single house turns its door to different compass points. The forest chooses both answers. Sometimes 3 chimneys breathe in a triangle, smoke braided. Sometimes one chimney shifts its voice through the day. Inside, the same hearth holds 3 kinds of heat: cooling, steady, rising. Teaching time by temperature rather than clocks. A woodcutter came heavy with grievance, carrying numbers that did not match his nights. Night's sister gave him distances to walk between thresholds, counting by breath and footprint. The task trained attention to consequence. What he believed were debts unraveled into shortcuts, taken against his own standards. When he returned lighter, Earth's sister put tools in his hands until calluses learned arithmetic better than ledgers. When the season turned, Dawn's sister arranged a table long enough to seat those he had miscounted. Bread traveled the planks like a cheerful messenger. Faces that once narrowed widened by degrees, not spectacle. Forgiveness appeared practical, disguised as bowls refilled in the correct direction. The village slept with fewer latches that week. The woodcutter forgot the exact moment peace arrived, which is typical of peace. A queen sought them in a year when prosperity cracked at the corners. Palaces swell quickly. Foundations sulk in silence. Night's sister led her through empty corridors until echoes told the truth about excess. Earth's sister drafted laws directly into soil, obligations traced by furrow and footpath. Dawn's sister rehearsed openings, markets timed to hunger, schools timed to daylight, until the kingdom remembered how to breathe without applause. Veterans returned to farms that no longer recognized their names. Night's sister restored the grammar of sleeping. Hour by hour, Earth's sister taught hands to memorize useful weight again. Bucket, hoe, child. Dawn's sister synchronized mornings with birds, not bells, reducing the distance between waking and purpose. Time stopped scolding. Work found its cadence. The fields repaid attention with shy abundance, like animals trusting again. There are nights when the three are one elder crossing a clearing, cane tapping a rhythm that reassures rabbits and warns thieves. There are mornings when they are three crows convening on a birch, discussing jurisprudence with glittering eyes. Their shapes shift according to audience. Principle remains: close what must close, open what must open, and hold the hinge steady when hesitation shakes the door. Children learn thresholds from Night's sister. She shows them the difference between inside and almost, how a story's beginning is a doorway, and how endings require tidying. They carry candles correctly after her lessons, not to conquer dark, but to locate each other. Fear reduces to proportion. Monstrous shapes in corners confess they were furniture misfiled by imagination. Beds regain their purpose. Windows regain their view. Earth's sister teaches provenance. She traces bread backward, from crust to crumb, from crumb to grain, from grain to field, from field to rain, and further, into the hush where intention chooses matter. Children stare until wonder translates into chores. They learn that gratitude is not a posture, but a cycle. Seed, labor, waiting harvest, sharing, rest. Plates become small altars that require maintenance more than worship. Dawn's sister keeps beginning kits near doors. Fresh lists, mended shoes, clear water. She refuses urgency and cultivates momentum. People step outside expecting spectacle and receive usefulness instead. Footing on frost, light that does not brag, a road agreeing to carry weight. Regret loosens when the horizon behaves like a promise. Small starts multiply, and the village becomes a choir singing under its breath. A merchant arrived with velvet, coins, and a mirror framed like a soft oath, expecting to purchase fortune. Night dissolved the velvet into a darkness without exits, and placed him inside until measure returned. Earth converted coins into tools, surrendering shine for leverage. Dawn turned the mirror outward, so the street appeared in it, not his face. He left poorer in inventory, rich in direction. Some years demand sharper instruments. Night's sister carries them without malice. A blade that trims lies to harmless fibers, a scale that remembers context. Earth owns discipline like weather, a prolonged insistence that carves canyons out of stone. Dawn withholds beginnings when foundations sulk, delaying celebration until preparation deserves company. None of this is cruel. It is form, reality declining to speak in flattery. When plague walked the roads, the sisters moved in relay, quieter than bells. Night counted breaths and returned rhythm to panicked lungs. Earth trained hands until water spoke fluently across knuckles and palms. Dawn braided small hope into windowsills. Paper, light, surprising patience. Records show many names, lost and held. The forest keeps an unrecorded column marked accompanied. It extends farther than maps allow. Storms require choreography. Night measured the distance between flash and report, teaching houses to tighten themselves like careful fists. Earth cinched roofs to walls with rope that remembered ships. Drainage learned politeness. Dawn walked afterward, naming damages in an order that soothed despair into lists. People lifted, stacked, mended, exhaled. Thunder retreated, older and slightly better mannered for having met an audience prepared. A soldier returned with boots chewed by distance and a gaze that mistrusted silence. Night offered watchfulness without enemies, such as stars practicing consent. Earth insisted his hands differentiate between burden and tool. Muscles adopted usefulness again. Dawn set him on bridges, counting first smiles. By midday, his shoulders remembered how to lower. By evening, his street greeted him without rank, which is high rank. Markets bloom in clearings for an hour, like mushrooms after rain. The sisters trade there using unfamiliar currencies. Night purchases secrets and delivers them to their rightful keepers. Earth buys broken implements and sells back endurance with instructions. Dawn accepts only inaugurations, first attempts paid forward. Shoppers go home surprised to carry commitments instead of goods, and discover later that commitments weigh less than they feared. Not all visitors find the correct door. The forest has a policy of gentle refusals. Paths duplicate, then braid themselves into reconsideration. When travelers return bearing patience instead of demands, the thresholds realign. This is not punishment. It is posture training. The sisters prefer questions that arrive prepared to work. The hut prefers feet that learn its steps. Learning counts as knocking. There are funerals where the sisters attend unseen, conducting transitions like careful stage managers. Night orders the hours, so grief can breathe without performing. Earth arranges the ground to hold without consuming the living. Dawn positions the first laugh of remembrance at a precise distance from the graveside, far enough not to bruise, close enough to lead home. Morning becomes locomotion, not anchor. There are weddings they encourage with subtle corrections. Night gathers unruly toasts into blessings by adjusting timing in the lungs. Earth steadies bread and salt, so hands succeed at their messages. Dawn sows extra shadows at thresholds. Partnerships deserve more light than singular lives, and additional shade protects it. Guests feel luck. The forest notes alignment. The difference rarely matters to people dancing correctly. Sometimes the sisters share one chair, bone bright and burnished by weather. From there they audit stories passing like caravans. Some tales shrink when asked for receipts. Others expand, fed by detail that proves compassion. The chair has grooves carved by 1,000 verdicts, none of them legal, all of them binding. People leave taller, not because absolution inflated them, but because responsibility straightened them. Travelers insist on proof. The forest demonstrates instead. 3 winds arrive from different directions, and all leaves turn their pale sides upward. Palms of trees opened. A trio of foxes pause in sequence upon a fallen log. Gazes coordinated toward the road's empty future. Kettles whistle in 3 houses at 1 heartbeat. Theology is welcome. Supper is sufficient. Both remain true simultaneously. A scholar attempted to classify them into lattices. Charts multiplied until paper resembled snowfall. Night scattered the pages across a pond. Letters learned to swim. Earth planted the rest and harvested unfamiliar harvests, indexes of deeds rather than words. Dawn kept the scholar's pen and returned him a pencil, easier to revise. He began walking with questions that could keep pace beside breath. The sisters do not aspire to goodness. They aspire to correctness. Goodness depends on opinion, correctness on calibration. A blade dulls if praised for shining. A field sulks if ploughed in compliments. A sunrise will not arrive faster because crowds chant. Tools, ground, and light prefer precise agreements. People grow less lonely when the universe answers in verbs that fit their hands. Winter loosened gently after certain labors concluded. Icicles resigned from duties, their contracts melted. Hinges remembered generosity. The river negotiated with its banks, promising to behave with energy rather than violence. Law returned as thaw, resuming flow where obstinacy had staged a siege. Forgiveness entered like competent weather, fixing more than it explained, asking only that gratitude learn to practice quietly. In a year of poor harvests, Earth's sister walked invisible through fields, whispering patience into roots. Farmers learned to plant shorter ambitions, beans instead of boasts, saving larger hopes for stronger rains. Community rearranged around soups rather than feasts. Hunger did not vanish. It found fewer edges to bleed against. People learned the art of sharing without telling biographies first. The lesson lasted longer than scarcity. Night's sister guards archives the world cannot risk forgetting. Faces, gestures, small rescues that never wrote themselves down. She shelves them in star order, where retrieval depends on humility more than request. Dreamers stumble upon their own histories properly edited. Regret becomes instruction. Those who wake well from such loans confess that darkness contains librarians, and silence writes margins filled with legible counsel. Dawn's sister keeps a ledger of beginnings that failed with honor. Attempts do not embarrass her. She counts the splinters collected from broken starts and turns them into kindling for somebody else's morning. In this arithmetic, failure warms the next room. Children inherit courage by proximity. Streets become laboratories that prefer iteration over verdict. Cities breathe better when mornings own their experiments. An artisan lost the use of 2 fingers and thought usefulness over. Earth's sister rewrote technique into new arrangements. The craft adapted, then refused to apologize for difference. Night archived the old patterns with tenderness, but no nostalgia. Dawn introduced customers to the revised beauty without ceremony. The shop survived because excellence arrived dressed in alternatives. Pride learned a smaller, nobler chair. A thief surrendered exhaustion rather than guilt. Night repurposed his stealth for kinder errands, returning misplaced things to rightful thresholds. Earth gave him roots mapped by need, not profit. Dawn allocated first light to stoves along his street until habits changed. He became furniture in the neighborhood, useful, unremarkable, trusted. Redemption rarely escorts trumpets. It prefers a broom and a list. Sometimes storms argue. The sisters refereed without speaking. Night set boundaries for lightning, keeping the spectacle within dignity. Earth opened floodplains pre-agreed with willow and reed. Water rehearsed swelling without surprise. Dawn walked the aftermath, placing brightness where it would not insult fatigue. Houses counted themselves present. Streets corrected their posture. Gratitude circulated like tea. Hot enough to matter, ordinary enough to drink. The hut stands upon legs that could stride continents and chooses instead to learn one clearing deeply. It turns its doorway toward those who need thresholds and rotates away from those who need walking. The fence of skull lanterns glows like a syllabus, each light a finished lesson, each socket promising fuel for the next. Children wave, the fence nods, approval disguised as fright. Hunters tell of 3 silhouettes sharing a pond's surface. One dark as ink, one broad as meadow, one bright as coin beneath water. They do not speak, they calibrate. The reflection holds steady even when wind heckles. Geese ignore the debate, arriving on time, trusting choreography older than migration. The sisters leave no footprints in the mud, only improved behavior where ankles met shore. In famine, Earth's sister rationed with fierce fairness, dividing by need rather than noise. Night protected the distribution with quiet that discouraged spectacle. Dawn documented the system in chalk on every wall available, erasing as conditions changed. The village survived not by miracle, but by manners enforced gently. Later, abundance returned, thinner for pride, stronger for memory, unwilling to forget the chalk. A child asked whether the sisters ever sleep. The forest supplied an answer without words. 3 breezes settled simultaneously in different corners of a field. Grasses reclined. Birds folded into themselves without alarm. The hut lowered a fraction, content. Sleep, it seemed, is not retreat, but rehearsal for the next precision. Tools rest to sharpen. Rivers rest to carry. Fire rests to instruct. Sometimes the world requests pageantry. The sisters oblige only when spectacle serves scaffolding. Night stages constellations across ice, so skaters discover geometry with joy. Earth paints harvests in colors that teach appetite to praise limits. Dawn throws ribbons of aurora, where towns require wonder to continue mending roofs. Nobody claps at the right time. The right time is later, during chores. Pilgrims leave offerings at random trees, inventing altars where wind permits. The sisters prefer gifts that continue moving, bread broken and carried to someone absent, water hauled farther than convenience suggests, mended tools loaned without signatures. The forest records these exchanges with growth rings rather than inscriptions. Gratitude becomes woody, durable, able to bear next year's weather without theatrical rehearsal. There are seasons when beginnings must wait. Dawn does not arrive late. She arrives appropriate. Schools open a week after arrogance sits down. Markets pause long enough for fairness to catch up. Weddings choose cooler hours when tempers will not melt the frosting. Patience ceases to be punishment and reintroduces itself as the geometry of outcomes that deserve longevity. In a city beyond the last spruce, bells rang at no one's command, and then fell quiet, as if a hand had learned restraint. Librarians misshelved one book correctly, placing it where a tired reader would find surprise. Cobblers tightened a neglected stitch for no charge. Balance does not announce itself. It revises habits with a carpenter's modesty and an editor's pencil. Rumors multiply around the sisters like ivy. Saints, demons, widows, triplets, illusions. The forest waters none of it. It prefers observable behavior, fields harvested respectfully, gates mended before complaint, bridges swept by whoever first arrives. The hut cares chiefly for footwork. The skulls prefer consistency. Legends bloom anyway, because humans need grammar for wonder. The sisters accept grammar, then correct usage by example. Morning walks into the clearing in soft shoes. Frost freckles step aside. The hut blinks once, then again, stretching a timber as a cat stretches spine. Tools lift their chins from hooks. Chickens reconsider philosophy and settle on grain. The clearing smells of work about to be done correctly. No speeches, only coordinated readiness, making music at the volume of breath. If someone insists on deciding which sister to honor, the forest offers a mirror made of water, bread warm enough to share, and a horizon traveling in both directions. Choose the reflection if courage needs calibration. Choose the bread if appetite needs manners. Choose the horizon if beginning has stalled. The correct answer is all three, practiced in order suitable to the day. Evening remakes the clearing into cathedral. Stars collect in the rafters of branches, constellations arguing gently in ancient lore. The hut settles on its heels and learns the night again. Somewhere, far off, a village lays down its tools without losing momentum. The sisters pass unseen, not to be worshipped, but to be imitated. The forest keeps their names. The world keeps their work. When the sisters vanished into distance, their work remained. The forest, remembering its own rhythm, began again in ordinary motion, tools rising, fires agreeing to warmth, silence stretching its shoulders. At the edge of this quiet competence, something older stirred beneath the roots. The witch rose, not summoned, but inherited. An answer the forest had already rehearsed. She did not come to judge or to bless, only to balance what lingered after reverence. She walked the margins where one world leaned against another. Hedgerows, ditches, parish lines, footpaths nobody owns. These were her corridors. At such edges, people bargained without knowing. Time for bread, pride for sleep, haste for accuracy. She listened, not to choose sides, but to keep gravity honest. When measure tilted, she pressed once with a fingertip, and the scales relearned their equilibrium. Famine came thin and thorough. Fields forgot their grammar. She conjured no bread, only syntax, water to seed, seed to soil, soil to hand. Villages sank pride into communal pots and found it added broth instead of bitterness. The year's bargain rewrote monuments into kitchens. History miscounted. Bodies remembered precisely, and memory kept them gentler than hunger would have preferred. Bonfires rose to punish what fear could not understand. She stood at the field's far edge, prying tinder from tinder, redirecting sparks toward snow, untying knots inside verdicts. Some flames shrank to candle size and spent themselves telling truth to kitchen walls. Others devoured their sponsors. Fire kept its ledger faithfully, adding interest whenever rumor supplied the kindling. Engines taught smoke to return in disciplined columns. The bargain of coal was speed for sky, and cities learned to cough politely. She walked soot alleys writing equations on brick. Distance divided by kindness, industry multiplied by thresholds. Trains agreed to pause where markets were hungry, not simply where timetables bragged. Steel bowed without breaking when addressed with courtesy and consequence together. War shouted again, using modern syllables. Near lines that moved the wrong way, kitchens negotiated granular treaties, a bowl for an hour, a blanket for a night, a joke for a breath. She counted survivors by their capacity to share. Flags felt embarrassed after meals where enemies passed salt like relatives, and dawn arrived undecorated, sufficient for continuing. Forests thinned to make room for the speed of appetite. She walked the stumps like tombstones, replanting questions that would outlive their askers. The bargain was patience for shade, decades for song. Birds redrafted their maps. Rivers negotiated new corridors. She signed the treaties in September. Contracts written in chlorophyll endure longer than any quarterly oath. Grief scaled upward, rejecting spectacle. She curated smaller altars, a shoe on a step, a candle taming wind, a bowl promising return. Ceremony traded itself for continuity. People participated by continuing, which is the most difficult ritual. Streets adjusted their spine to bear it. Time slowed beside them, neither leader nor follower, only companion. Rumor claimed the hut had grown tired. She returned and found it breathing evenly, legs tucked like a resting bird. Dust had organized itself into a syllabus. The skull fence glowed amber, pleased. Wandering traded itself for witness. She swept the threshold, not to clean, but to acknowledge. Waiting, she realized, is labor misunderstood. No proclamation marked the ending. Embers breathed. The kettle remembered water. The floor upheld its modest sky. Somewhere, a city dimmed its windows. Somewhere, a village finished mending. She sat neither ruler nor recluse, simply present. The world moved evenly around her. Stillness listened and replied in kind. Thus the bargain was kept, and the forest slept content within its boundaries.